This vehicle violates the spirit of our community, and I will have it relocated." The words of Vanessa Pritchard slammed against my front door at 7:03 a.m. on a Monday. Not a polite knock, not even a doorbell ring. A voice sharp enough to crack glass, delivered with the confidence of someone who believes HOA bylaws are wrapped around her clipboard. She had no idea what I used to do at Dell Technologies, or how dangerous a software engineer with security system expertise could be when pushed too far. Leave a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever wanted to see someone who abuses power face real consequences, this is that story. But let me back up 3 weeks, to the day this all started. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September when the flatbed truck pulled up to my driveway in Pinewood Estates, Richardson, Texas, carrying something I had worked 22 years to afford. The Lamborghini Huracan Evo sat wrapped in protective covers on that trailer like a sculpture being delivered to a museum. Giallo Orion yellow, the color of pure sunlight captured in metal and carbon fiber. When the driver lowered it onto my driveway and I signed the delivery papers, I felt something I had not felt in the 3 years since retiring early at 41. I felt like I had earned something undeniable. The car was not just a car. It was proof that careful planning, smart investments, and a decade and a half of 80-hour work weeks could culminate in something tangible, something beautiful, something mine. My neighbors came out to look. Bruce Tennant, a 62-year-old retired civil engineer who lived 4 houses down, walked over with his coffee mug and let out a low whistle. He said it was the most beautiful machine he had ever seen outside a showroom. His wife, Claire, took a photo and told me her son would lose his mind when he saw it. Even the Kowalski kids from across the street stood on their lawn with their mouths open, pointing at the scissor doors when I opened them to show the interior. I felt good. I felt visible in a way that was not about showing off, but about being acknowledged for the work I had done to get here. I parked the Lamborghini in my 2-car garage that evening, installed 4 Nest 4K security cameras around the perimeter to protect my new investment, and went to bed feeling like I had finally made it. The cameras cost $299 each, totaling $1,196 for the full setup. I thought that was enough. I was wrong. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, Vanessa Pritchard knocked on my door. I had seen her around the neighborhood before, always walking with a tablet in one hand and a measuring tape clipped to her belt like some kind of suburban inspector general. She was 54 years old, a former real estate agent who had been the president of the Pinewood Estates HOA for 7 years. She lived alone in the largest house on the block, a 2-story colonial with immaculate landscaping and a mailbox that looked like it had been installed by someone who believed in perfection. When I opened the door, she did not smile. She looked past me, toward my closed garage, and said that my vehicle had caused a disruption. I asked what kind of disruption. She said neighbors had complained that the delivery drew a crowd of onlookers, including teenagers who loitered on the sidewalk taking photos, and that this kind of attention created a safety concern for families with young children. I told her I had read the entire 47-page covenant before purchasing my home 3 years ago, and there was no restriction on vehicle type or value. She tightened her lips and said it was not about the letter of the rules, but the spirit. I asked what that meant. She said Pinewood Estates was a traditional community, and vehicles like mine sent the wrong message about who we were. I kept my voice calm and told her I appreciated her perspective, but I had done nothing wrong. She said we would see about that, turned on her heel, and walked back to her car. 5 days later, I received my first official HOA violation notice in the mail. The citation claimed I was parking an oversized vehicle in my residential driveway in violation of Section 12-C of the Pinewood Estates Covenant. I pulled out my copy of the covenant and read Section 12-C. It stated that vehicles exceeding 5.5 meters in length could not be parked in driveways overnight. I measured my Lamborghini, 4.52 meters. I took photos with a tape measure clearly visible in the frame, showing the full length of the car from front bumper to rear diffuser. I wrote a formal email to the HOA board with the photos attached, and a polite explanation that my vehicle was well within the allowable length. Vanessa responded within 2 hours. She said the complaint was being reviewed and that I should expect further correspondence. There was no apology. There was no acknowledgement that the citation had been incorrect. just a vague promise of more to come. 10 days after that first citation, I received a second notice, this time for excessive engine noise. I knew immediately it was baseless. I had driven the car exactly 4 times, always during daylight hours, never during quiet hours. But what struck me was not the content of the citation. It was the tone. The first letter had been formal, bureaucratic, almost apologetic in its phrasing. This one was colder. It used phrases like repeated violations and failure to comply, even though I had complied with everything. It felt personal. I did not bother writing a detailed rebuttal this time. I simply replied that I had violated no noise ordinance and requested specifics on which neighbor had complained and at what time. Vanessa did not respond. Instead, 2 nights later, I saw her car parked at the end of my street. She sat in the driver's seat with her tablet glowing in the dark, angled toward my house. I realized she was not just watching. She was waiting for me to take the Lamborghini out after dark, hoping I would give her a legitimate noise complaint. I did not drive it that week. Bruce Tennant stopped by one evening in early October while I was checking my mail. He told me to be careful with Vanessa. He said there were rumors in the neighborhood, stories about 2 families who had left Pinewood Estates in the past few years after being subjected to relentless citations. The Martinez family, supposedly targeted over house paint that Vanessa claimed violated some aesthetic guideline. The Fosters, supposedly harassed over a tree that was too tall. Bruce said he did not know all the details, but the word around the block was that Vanessa had a way of making life unbearable until people just gave up and sold. Some people even whispered that she had bought their homes through some kind of shell company and flipped them for profit, though no one could prove it. He told me to document everything, to keep records, and to not let her push me out. He said she did not lose. I thanked him for the warning, but I did not tell him what I was already thinking. That night, I sat in my home office and stared at my laptop screen. For 3 years, I had been retired, detached, living quietly in a house I had bought with the money I made, designing security systems for one of the largest tech companies in the world. I had not thought about protocols, about system vulnerabilities, about building airtight cases for penetration testing in a long time. But sitting there, looking at the 2 baseless HOA citations pinned to my corkboard, I felt something old and familiar click back into place. Vanessa Pritchard thought she was in control. She thought the HOA bylaws and her 7 years of unchallenged authority made her untouchable. She had no idea that the quiet man in the house with the yellow Lamborghini knew exactly how to turn a system against the person who thought they owned it. I opened a new encrypted folder on my hard drive and titled it Pinewood Evidence Log. If she wanted to escalate, I would be ready, and I would make sure every single step she took was documented, time-stamped, and saved in triplicate by day 18. I had built a file that would make any corporate auditor proud. I submitted a formal records request to the Pinewood Estates HOA under Texas Property Code Section 209.005, which grants every homeowner the right to inspect association books and records within 10 business days. Vanessa could not refuse without violating state law, so she complied. What arrived in my email 3 days later was a 72-page PDF containing summarized violation logs, board meeting minutes, and correspondence records spanning the past 3 years. I imported the violation data into an Excel spreadsheet and started running numbers. The pattern that emerged was not subtle. In the past 3 years, Vanessa Pritchard had issued 127 violation notices to 31 different households in a community of 76 homes. That meant 41% of Pinewood Estates had been cited for something, and the violations ranged from reasonable concerns like uncut grass to absurd complaints like mailbox posts being half an inch too tall or porch lights exceeding an unwritten brightness standard. What stood out even more was the concentration. 15 of those 31 households had received multiple citations, some as many as 8 or 9 over the course of a single year. I pulled up the addresses Bruce had mentioned, the Martinez and Foster properties, and confirmed what he had told me. Both families had been cited repeatedly over minor issues before selling and leaving the neighborhood. Then I cross-referenced the addresses with public property records available through the Collin County Appraisal District website. Both homes had been purchased by the same buyer after the families moved out, a limited liability company called Pritchard Property Holdings. The name alone was enough to raise questions. I traced the sales further. The Martinez home had sold in June of 2023 for $31,000 below its appraised value, then resold 6 months later for $49,000 more. The Foster home followed a nearly identical pattern in 2024, purchased low and flipped for a $29,000 gain. Whether Vanessa controlled that LLC or not, I could not confirm from public records alone, but the timing and the name were hard to ignore. $78,000 in combined profit from two families who had been cited into submission. I printed the spreadsheet, highlighted the key entries, and called Gregory Stone. He was a real estate attorney I had worked with 3 years earlier when I bought my house. A 48-year-old man with a reputation for being calm under pressure and brutal when necessary. I met him at his office on a Wednesday afternoon and laid the documents on his desk. He read through them in silence, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad, and when he finished, he looked up at me and said, "This was troubling but complicated." He told me that proving harassment with financial intent was extremely difficult under Texas law. We would need to show not just a pattern of behavior, but clear evidence that Vanessa fabricated violations with the deliberate goal of forcing sales for her own benefit. Circumstantial connections to an LLC were not enough. We would need emails, recorded statements, or documentation showing she knew the citations were baseless and issued them anyway. He said what I had was a strong foundation, but it was not a case yet. I asked him what I should do. He told me to keep documenting everything, to install more cameras if I felt it was necessary, and to be prepared for her to escalate. He said people like Vanessa did not stop until they were cornered, and cornering someone required evidence so airtight they had no room to maneuver. I went home and installed 2 more cameras inside my garage. These were smaller, hidden models that I mounted inside the housing of my overhead LED lights. From the outside, they were invisible. From the inside, they covered every angle the exterior cameras could not see. I set them to record continuously with automatic cloud backup, meaning even if someone destroyed the physical cameras, the footage would already be saved off-site. The total cost for the 2 additional units was $340. I did not care. I was building something now, a net so tight that nothing could slip through. That same week, I started noticing Vanessa asking questions around the neighborhood. Bruce told me she had stopped by his house under the pretense of discussing upcoming HOA landscaping projects. But halfway through the conversation, she casually asked when I usually left for work or travel. Bruce said he told her he had no idea, that I kept to myself. Another neighbor, a woman named Gladys Porter who lived 2 streets over, mentioned that Vanessa had asked her the same thing while they were both at the mailboxes. Gladys was 71 years old and had lived in Pinewood Estates for 40 years. She did not trust Vanessa and told me outright that something felt wrong about the questioning. It was not just one conversation anymore. Vanessa was conducting reconnaissance. On day 25, I received an email from Vanessa with the subject line, "Final Warning." The body of the email was brief and cold. It stated that my vehicle must be removed from the property or relocated to an off-site storage facility within 30 days, or the HOA would take necessary action to protect community standards. There was no citation attached this time, no reference to a specific covenant violation, just the phrase "necessary action" hanging in the air like a threat. I read it 3 times, trying to parse what she meant. Necessary action could mean anything: a fine, a lien, a lawsuit, or something else entirely. I forwarded the email to Gregory Stone and asked for his interpretation. He called me 20 minutes later and said the phrasing was deliberately vague, likely intended to intimidate me into compliance without giving me anything concrete to challenge. He told me to respond in writing, state clearly that I was in full compliance with all covenant rules, and request clarification on what specific action the HOA intended to take. I did exactly that. Vanessa never replied. 2 nights later, the surveillance changed. I was washing dishes in my kitchen around 9:30 p.m. when I saw headlights sweep slowly across my front window, then stop. I looked out and saw Vanessa's black Lexus sedan parked 3 houses down, engine off, interior lights dimmed. This time, she did not just sit there passively. She got out of her car. I watched through the gap in my blinds as she walked halfway up the sidewalk toward my house, stopped at the edge of my driveway, and stared directly at my garage door for nearly 2 minutes. She was not pretending to check her phone or look at something else. She was studying the garage, the lock mechanism, the seams, the angles. Then she took out her phone, held it up, and appeared to take a photo. After that, she walked back to her car and drove away. I immediately pulled up the footage from my exterior cameras. The angle was perfect. I had a clear recording of her exiting her vehicle, walking onto my property, photographing my garage, and leaving. The timestamp read 9:41 p.m. I saved the file, labeled it Trespassing and Surveillance October 28, and added it to my evidence folder. This was no longer passive observation. Vanessa was planning something, and whatever it was, she was getting ready to act. On day 32, I received an email that changed everything. It came from an anonymous sender using a generic email address with no name attached. Just a subject line that read, "You need to know the truth about Vanessa Pritchard." Inside was a single PDF file containing a chain of internal HOA board emails dating back 6 months. I opened it carefully, half expecting spam or some kind of phishing attempt, but the metadata checked out. The file properties showed it had been exported directly from an email client, not altered or fabricated, and the sender addresses matched the official HOA domain. What I found inside was damning. The emails were between Vanessa and 2 other board members, discussing what they called non-compliant properties and strategies for enforcement. One email in particular stopped me cold. It was dated 4 months before I ever bought the Lamborghini, and in it, Vanessa wrote, "The Lamborghini precedent will allow us to enforce any standard we choose. Luxury vehicles today, pets tomorrow, paint colors the day after. Pinewood will be the community I design, and residents will either comply or leave." She was not targeting me because of the car. She was targeting the car because it gave her an excuse to establish total control. If she could force me to get rid of a vehicle that violated no written rule, she could do the same with anything else. This was about power, not property values. I forwarded the email to Gregory Stone immediately. He called me within the hour and said this was strong evidence of intent, possibly the strongest piece we had so far. The email showed Vanessa was not acting out of genuine concern for the community, but out of a desire to expand her authority beyond what the covenant allowed. He told me that combined with the violation patterns and the property transactions, we had a solid foundation for a harassment claim. But he also cautioned me. He said the email alone would not be enough to stop her. We would need her to act on that intent in a way that crossed into criminal behavior, something we could document beyond any doubt. He told me to prepare for the possibility that she might try something drastic, and when she did, we needed to be ready to catch her in the act. I asked him how we would prove it if she did. He said we would need her to incriminate herself, and the only way to do that was to let her think she could get away with it. That afternoon, I sat down with Gregory Stone and Detective James Morrison of the Richardson Police Department. Morrison was 51 years old, a veteran investigator with the Property Crimes Unit. Stone had brought him in because the pattern of behavior, the surveillance footage, and the threatening emails constituted credible indicators that a crime might be attempted. Morrison said that, under those circumstances, the department could coordinate a response if I was willing to document any unlawful entry. I laid out everything: the violation notices, the surveillance, the veiled threats, the internal emails, and the fact that Vanessa had been asking neighbors when I would be away from home. Morrison listened without interrupting, taking notes on a small pad, and when I finished, he asked to see the layout of my garage and the camera system I had installed. I showed him the 6 camera positions covering every angle. Morrison nodded and said if Vanessa attempted to enter my garage without permission, we would have her on burglary charges. If she touched the vehicle or attempted to move it, the charges would escalate significantly. But he said we needed to make sure the setup was airtight, with no gaps in coverage and no way for her to claim the footage was tampered with. We spent the next hour planning what Morrison called a passive sting operation. The goal was simple: create an opportunity for Vanessa to act on her threats while ensuring that every action she took was documented beyond any reasonable doubt. I would leave my garage security deliberately imperfect, just weak enough that someone determined could get inside with basic tools, but not so obvious that it screamed trap. I would leave the car keys inside the vehicle, visible on the center console. If Vanessa entered and sat in the car, her intent would be clear. I would leave the rear gate of my garage slightly ajar, making it look like an easy exit route. And most importantly, I would create the appearance that I was out of town, giving her the confidence to act. Morrison said if she took the bait, if she broke in and attempted to take the vehicle, we would have her on felony charges that could carry serious prison time. He told me that if we did this, we had to do it perfectly. One mistake, one gap in the evidence, and a defense attorney would dismantle the case. Over the next 3 days, I prepared. I tested every camera to confirm the timestamps were synchronized and the cloud backup was functioning. I replaced the standard deadbolt on my garage side door with a cheaper model that could be picked with basic tools, ensuring any forced entry would still be visible on camera. I moved my Lamborghini to a position where all 6 cameras had clear views of the driver's side door and the ignition. I placed the key fob on the center console in plain sight. I unlocked the rear gate and left it open just enough that someone could walk through. Then I staged my departure. I told Bruce Tennant that I would be attending a conference in San Antonio from November 10th through November 12th. 3 full days. I made sure to mention it casually, the way someone would share travel plans without thinking twice. Bruce immediately understood and said he would keep an eye on my house. I knew the information would spread. In a neighborhood like Pinewood Estates, everyone talked. On the evening of November 9th, I packed a duffel bag, loaded it into my car, and drove to my friend's house 2 miles away. I did not announce the trip anywhere publicly. I simply disappeared from my house and waited. Morrison had a patrol unit on standby half a mile away, ready to respond within 90 seconds if I gave the signal. Gregory Stone had prepared all the necessary legal documentation. I sat in my friend's living room with my laptop open, watching the live feed from all 6 cameras. The garage was empty. The Lamborghini sat perfectly centered under the overhead lights. The key fob gleamed on the console, and the rear gate swung gently in the night breeze. If Vanessa Pritchard wanted to take my car, she would never have a better opportunity. All I had to do was wait and see if she would take the bait I had so carefully laid out for her. Nothing happened on the first night. I sat in my friend's living room with my laptop open, watching 6 camera feeds display an empty garage, a silent driveway, and a neighborhood that went to sleep without incident. By 2 a.m., I was starting to wonder if Vanessa had seen through the setup, if maybe she had decided the risk was too great, or if someone had tipped her off. But then I reminded myself what Gregory Stone had told me. People like Vanessa did not act impulsively. They planned. They waited for the perfect moment. And the perfect moment, from her perspective, would be when she was certain I was gone and no one was watching. So I waited through the second night as well, watching the same empty frames, the same stillness, until exhaustion finally pulled me into a shallow sleep sometime after 3 a.m. When I woke up on the morning of November 12th, the 3rd day of my supposed absence, I checked the camera logs and saw nothing. But I had a feeling. Something told me that if Vanessa was going to act, it would be tonight, the last night before my scheduled return, when her window of opportunity was about to close. At 2:37 a.m. on November 13th, my phone erupted with motion alerts from all 6 cameras simultaneously. I sat up so fast I nearly knocked the laptop off the coffee table. On the screen, I watched as a dark sedan pulled up to the curb 3 houses down from mine with its headlights off. The driver's side door opened, and Vanessa Pritchard stepped out. She was dressed in black pants and a dark jacket, and she carried a small black bag in one hand. She looked left, then right, then walked quickly toward my house, staying close to the hedges along the sidewalk. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm and keep watching. Camera 1, mounted on the front corner of my garage, captured her approaching the side door. She set the bag down, unzipped it, and pulled out what looked like a small toolkit. What followed was not the smooth work of someone experienced. She fumbled with the tension wrench, dropped the pick once, and had to crouch down to retrieve it. It took her 4 minutes and 12 seconds of awkward trial and error before the cheap deadbolt finally gave way. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. She was inside my garage. Camera 2, the wide-angle interior camera, showed her stepping carefully into the space, using her phone's flashlight to navigate. She walked directly to the Lamborghini, ran her hand along the hood, and muttered something under her breath that I could not make out clearly. though her tone sounded both frustrated and determined. Then she opened the driver's side door, which I had deliberately left unlocked, and slid into the seat. Camera 3, the close-angle camera mounted near the workbench, captured her looking around the interior, her eyes landing on the key fob sitting in plain sight on the center console. She picked it up, held it for a moment as if weighing her options, then pressed the start button. The engine roared to life, the unmistakable growl of a V10 engine filling the enclosed space. I whispered to myself, she just crossed the line. But what happened next made everything far worse. Vanessa did not just start the car, she put it in reverse. Camera 4, the dashboard camera I had installed inside the vehicle, captured her face in perfect clarity as she backed the Lamborghini out of its parking spot and began maneuvering it toward the rear gate. She was attempting to steal a vehicle worth nearly $300,000. I grabbed my phone and called Detective Morrison. He answered on the first ring, already awake and waiting. I said, "She is in the garage. She started the car. She is driving it toward the back gate." Morrison's voice was calm and immediate. He said, "We are moving now. Stay on the line." I had been sending him silent updates via text as each stage unfolded, so his team knew exactly when to intercept. I could hear him relaying orders, the sound of car doors slamming, engines starting, on my laptop screen. I watched as Vanessa guided the Lamborghini through the narrow path between my workbench and the rear wall, heading toward the gate I had left ajar. Camera 5, mounted near the rear exit, showed the car's brake lights glowing red as she paused, checking to see if the alley behind my property was clear. She eased the car forward, the front bumper passing through the gate opening. She was 10 feet from the alley. That was when the flashing red and blue lights lit up the narrow passage like a stage. 2 police cruisers blocked both ends of the access road, and Detective Morrison and 3 uniformed officers moved in with flashlights and firm commands. I heard Morrison's voice, loud and clear even through my laptop speakers, shouting, "Ma'am, turn off the engine and step out of the vehicle immediately." Vanessa froze. I could see it on camera 6, the exterior view from the alley side. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her face pale in the glow of the police lights. For a moment, I thought she might try to ram her way through, but then she put the car in park, and the engine went silent. Morrison approached the driver's side window and repeated the command. Vanessa opened the door slowly and stepped out, her hands raised but her expression already shifting into something defensive. Morrison asked her to identify herself. She said her name, her voice shaking but still carrying that edge of authority she always wielded. Then she said, "This is a misunderstanding. I am the HOA president. I have the authority to relocate non-compliant property for the good of the community." Morrison did not react with anger or argument. He simply exchanged a glance with one of the other officers, a look that said they had heard every absurd justification imaginable, and this one ranked near the top. Morrison said, "Ma'am, you are under arrest for burglary of a habitation and attempted theft of a motor vehicle. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." One of the officers stepped forward with handcuffs, and I watched through the camera as Vanessa Pritchard was placed in restraints and led to a police cruiser, still insisting that she had done nothing wrong. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, barely able to process what had just happened. 3 weeks of planning, 6 cameras, 1 carefully constructed opportunity, and Vanessa had walked into it exactly as we had predicted. She had broken into my garage with tools she barely knew how to use, entered my vehicle, started the engine, and attempted to drive it off my property. Every single action had been captured on video from multiple angles, time-stamped, and backed up beyond her reach. Detective Morrison called me back 10 minutes later and told me to come down to my house. When I arrived, the Lamborghini was back in my garage, parked exactly where it had been before Vanessa touched it. Morrison met me at the door and handed me a flash drive containing copies of all the footage his team had reviewed on site. He said the charges were solid. Vanessa would face serious felony counts, and the evidence left her no room to maneuver. I stood there in my garage, looking at my car, and felt something I had not felt in weeks. Not anger, not fear, just cold, clear satisfaction. Justice was not just coming. It had already arrived. The news spread through Pinewood Estates faster than I expected. By 8 a.m. on November 13th, less than 6 hours after Vanessa's arrest. My phone was lighting up with messages from neighbors asking if what they heard was true. Bruce Tennant called me directly and said he had seen the police lights from his bedroom window and could not believe Vanessa had been arrested for breaking into my garage. By noon, the local Richardson news outlets had picked up the story. The headline read, HOA president arrested for burglary and attempted theft in Pinewood Estates. Vanessa was released on $50,000 bail by 2 p.m. that same day, but the damage to her reputation was immediate and irreversible. I did not make any public statements. I simply waited, because I knew the HOA board would have to respond. 3 days later, on November 16th, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The email went out to all 76 homeowners with a subject line that read, "Mandatory board meeting regarding recent events." I arrived at the community center at 7 p.m. and found the parking lot nearly full. 68 families were represented that night, the highest turnout in 7 years. The room was tense. Vanessa sat at the front table beside 2 other board members, her face pale but her posture still rigid. Gregory Stone sat beside me with a folder containing the internal emails, the violation spreadsheet, and a timeline of every citation Vanessa had issued. When the meeting was called to order, the vice president, Richard Kowalski, said the board needed to address the situation before he could continue. Vanessa stood and said she wanted to speak. Vanessa said, "What happened last week was a profound misunderstanding. I was acting as the HOA president to address a property violation. I had no intention of stealing anything. I was relocating the vehicle to a secure location until the matter could be resolved." The room stayed silent, but I could see people exchanging glances of disbelief. Gregory Stone stood and asked if he could present evidence. Kowalski nodded. Stone walked to the front, connected his laptop to the projector, and played the footage. 6 camera angles. Vanessa is picking the lock. Vanessa started the Lamborghini. Vanessa is backing it toward the gate. The room watched in silence. When it ended with her arrest, Stone said, "This is not a misunderstanding. This is burglary and attempted theft, captured on video with timestamps that cannot be disputed. No covenant clause grants the HOA president authority to do this." Then Stone revealed the final piece. He displayed the internal email on the projector and read aloud Vanessa's message from 6 months earlier. "The Lamborghini precedent will allow us to enforce any standard we choose. Luxury vehicles today, pets tomorrow, paint colors the day after. Pinewood will be the community I design, and residents will either comply or leave." The room erupted. Stone then showed the LLC registration under Vanessa's name and the Martinez and Foster property transactions. He said, "Vanessa Pritchard used her position to harass homeowners, pressure them into selling, then bought their homes at a discount and flipped them for profit. This is not leadership. This is fraud." Kowalski called for an emergency vote to remove Vanessa from the board. The vote was 71 in favor, 0 opposed. Vanessa walked out without a word. Justice was being witnessed by the entire community. 3 months later, on a cold morning in February, I sat in a courtroom in Collin County watching Vanessa Pritchard stand before a judge to hear her sentence. She had accepted a plea bargain after her attorney reviewed the mountain of evidence against her and told her that fighting the charges would be suicide. She pled guilty to burglary of a habitation, a second-degree felony, and attempted theft, reduced from the original first-degree felony charge in exchange for her cooperation. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 4 years. In addition, she was ordered to pay me $47,500 in restitution, covering my legal fees, the cost of the security system upgrades, and compensation for emotional distress. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Texas. I sat in the gallery and watched as Vanessa was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Her face blank, her shoulders slumped. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction in seeing her broken. I just felt relieved that it was finally over. Back in Pinewood Estates, the community began the long process of healing. The HOA held elections for a new board, and Bruce Tennant was voted in as the new president by an overwhelming majority. His first act was to call a meeting where he publicly apologized on behalf of the board to every family that had been unfairly cited under Vanessa's reign. He specifically reached out to the Martinez and Foster families, both of whom had moved out of state, and sent formal letters of apology along with payments of $5,000 each from the HOA Reserve Fund as a gesture of goodwill. Bruce also implemented new rules requiring that any covenant amendment be approved by a vote of at least 67% of homeowners, in full compliance with Texas Property Code Section 209.0041, and that all violation notices include specific citations from the covenant with photographic evidence. The changes were not just procedural, they were cultural. People started talking to each other again, attending meetings, holding each other accountable in a way that felt collaborative rather than punitive. As for me, I still live in the same house on the same quiet street in Pinewood Estates. The Lamborghini sits in my garage, and I drive it 2 or 3 times a week, usually on weekends when the roads are clear and the sun is out. My neighbors no longer see it as a symbol of excess or a threat to property values. If anything, it has become a reminder of what happens when someone stands up to a bully with evidence, patience, and the law on their side. Bruce and his wife Claire stop by occasionally to admire the car, and the Kowalski kids still ask if they can sit in the driver's seat and pretend to race. I always say yes. A few weeks ago, I received a letter from Gladys Porter, the 71-year-old woman who had warned me about Vanessa's questioning. She thanked me for not giving up, for not being the third family to leave, and for showing everyone that power without accountability eventually collapses under its own weight. I think about that a lot. Vanessa Pritchard spent 7 years building a system of control based on fear, intimidation, and the assumption that no one would ever challenge her authority with anything more than complaints. She underestimated one simple fact. When you push someone who knows how to build systems, who understands evidence chains, and who refuses to be intimidated, you are not just picking a fight. You are walking into a trap of your own making. I did not beat Vanessa with anger or revenge. I beat her with timestamps, video footage, legal code, and the patience to let her incriminate herself. That is what justice looks like when it is done right. Not loud, not theatrical, just methodical and undeniable. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt powerless against someone who abused their authority, I want you to know that you are not alone. Document everything. Know your rights. Stay calm. And never let anyone tell you the rules do not apply to you. This is Karma Clause, where we tell the stories of people who thought they were untouchable until they were not. If you believe in accountability, in standing up for what is right, and in the idea that justice is not just a concept, but something you can build with your own hands, then support this channel. Share these stories. Let people know that power without integrity always falls. Always.